Buenos dias. Grand Rising. Welcome back to everyone. I'm going to try to make this video very quick because I do have an event that I'm going to go to this afternoon, right after this video. But I wanted to address this email that I received 2 days ago, which I found was very interesting. Now, I know it has been a brief moment since I've come to you guys and done a video on cuckolding. What was my last video on cuckolding? I can't remember the title. You guys remind me. What was my last video on cuckolding? Either way, when I got the email, given that the title of the email is Cuckoldry and Racial Dynamics, Some Observations, I'm like, here we go again, cuckold video. I'm like completely over it by now, right? I'm like, how many different ways can we address the topic of cuckolding, right, in which we haven't already addressed? So I'm a bit over it, but as I was reading through this email carefully, I noticed something that we have not addressed, right? And I'm just like, I got an epiphany as I was reading the email. So I'm going to read this email, and then I'm going to share with you guys my response to this email, my honest, heartfelt opinion, okay? And then I want you guys to let me know what you think about it. So, I'm like, oh, that's what it is. Alright, so this person sent this email on September 15th, and he says, hello, Danny. I have learned a lot from some of your videos about BDSM and racial dynamics. And that's another thing. Like, I'm not even really a part of the cuckoldry lifestyle, right? Granted, I identify myself as a submissive, as a baby girl. But I haven't really talked much about BDSM. So I think I'm going to kind of gravitate more back towards talking about things that interest me and that I actually partake in, right? Because I don't really participate in cuckoldry activities, although I've said before that I do thoroughly enjoy talking about alternative sexual lifestyles. But this isn't really my forte. This isn't really my cup of tea. So I'm definitely going to gravitate. So if you guys have any questions, any video topic ideas related to BDSM, to bondage. Okay, these are my things. Bondage, discipline spankings. Yeah, just leave it right there. Bondage and discipline spankings. Feel free to send me an email. A lot of you guys contact me on Facebook, and that's not really my preferred method of communication. So reach out to me via my Gmail email account, okay? Alright, he says, I have learned a lot from some of your videos about BDSM and racial dynamics. What do you think about this situation? And I'm like, okay, here we go. Another made up fantasy, another hypothetical fantasy scenario. Like, I'm over those, okay? But it does make for good conversation. So I'm willing to entertain it. It says, I am currently divorced because my his ex-wife, had an affair with a black male at her gym. Why always have to take place at the gym? This is how I know it's fantasy, right? Because there's a common theme amongst guys who are titillated, who get aroused by even just thinking about and talking about cuckoldry, right? And themselves being a cuckold. They get aroused by this. They have this fantasy somehow, and the location of this fantasy usually takes place surrounding a gym. This is not uncommon. And then he puts in parentheses after the gym part, we are white. No, duh. I think I already knew that. I mean, I was just thinking about this yesterday. I rarely get messages from people, men and women, who are black. I'm starting to believe that most of my audience, although they're not my target audience, but most of you guys are not black. There are some black people speckled in there, though. All right, so I'm gonna reread that last sentence. He says, "I am currently divorced because my ex-wife had an affair with a black male at her gym." I wonder, how long were you guys married? He says, "However, I recently went on a date with a black woman who was interested in dating." Okay, it's kind of already assumed that if you went on a date with her, she's interested in dating. She's interested in dating you. You mean? If I decided to move forward into a relationship with this woman, something inside me wants my ex-wife to know about it. I want to make her jealous, especially since she is still together with her lover who knew full well she was married. So I'm getting the flavor that this is less of a cuckold dynamic, right? And more so revenge, like more so a white man who has been brutally hurt and disappointed. But I see how it relates though, right? Because there's this interracial dynamic where his wife essentially left him for a black man. He's a white man that was married to a white woman, and his wife left him for a black man, right? We've talked about this before in previous videos relating to cuckoldry and why black men are the prize essentially in those dynamics as a bull, right? Being able to thoroughly satisfy the lesser endowed white man's wife. So I see how he's relating the two, but as I said, it seems like his situation is very unique, which is the reason why I kind of got excited about addressing this as I was reading through the details. I'm like, okay, so I'm going to get into my perspective on this, which relates to the topic of this video. The secret that white men don't want black men to know. I'm like, now I feel like this isn't really a secret to most people in the black community. We know what's up, right? We know where the hatred comes from, which is what contributes to the racial discrimination, the racial oppression, this racially oppressive system that has been created. Like, people who are conscious, right, and who study history and politics, we're well aware, right, of where it stems from. In fact, there's a meme that has been created that simply says, there's a picture of Julius Caesar, and it says, this is the reason. This is where racial oppression, this is where racism started from, right? So there's a picture of Julius Caesar, and we know, like, the typical picture that we see. He's unclothed, right? And he has his unerect penis, like, on display. But the size of it is where the attention is drawn to, the size of it. And then juxtaposed against that, there's a black man, like it's a figure, it's like a statue figure of a black man who is much more endowed down there. So I thought that meme was so funny because, like I said, picture's worth 1,000 words, and putting those two pictures, right, those two images side by side, and then the explanation for racial oppression, it just tickled me. So let's keep reading. He wants to make her jealous, especially since she is still together with her lover who knew full well she was married. So, like, you can get the tone that this was not consensual, right? In the context of a cuckoldry relationship, the cuckold, the white man, usually gives his wife permission, right? There's mutual consent between him and his wife for her to be, satisfied by an outside partner who is typically a black bull, right? A black man. This didn't seem consensual at all. Like, she went out and behind his back, right? She stepped outside of their marriage, which clearly she was not being satisfied in, especially in the area of sex, and she got her needs met by someone who could fulfill what she was looking for. So it still that left a sour taste in his mouth, apparently, right? He's hurt by it. And I think, listen, as like we're working through this, right, and as I'm thinking, I think these videos, right, these experiences, these lessons should really be something that white men hold on to. Like, you went through this as a white man, right? So I just ordered some breakfast delivery, and it's about to pull up any minute now. Let me grab this. Give me a second, guys. Alright. I think, like, this should be a warning message for white men. But granted, you have some white men who are very confident, maybe overly confident in their marriage, their fidelity within their marriage on their end, and especially on the end of their wife, being faithful to them and not stepping outside of the marriage. But I think marriage is so complicated, right? Like, the idea is that, you know, two people, usually a man and a woman. Nowadays, it can be two men, two women. They go in it with this idea that they're going to be together for better or for worse, right? And then contingent upon that is this idea that they're going to be mutually exclusive. It's only going to be them, right? And if anything else happens, then there should be a degree of disclosure and honesty and transparency, right, surrounding whatever actions that are not in alignment with the mutually agreed terms. I just think that it's interesting, and a lot is not talked about. So the fact that this guy, let's say this is a real story, right? Which part of me is thinking no, because the whole gym thing, right? Saying that they met at the gym. This black man, he had an affair with his wife at a gym. But I don't know. Like, a lot of people do go to the gym. And I feel like that's just a common, like, location. That's like a common theme, location amongst a lot of people who fantasize about this lifestyle. So that's why I'm like, I don't know. But I think that if this is a real situation, right, it's very telling, though. Like, he's honest enough to share this experience with us, right? What happened and what is likely to happen, what's probably happening in many households. That's where my mind is going. I'm like, okay, usually if a person is sharing this, and let's say even if it is fantasy, right? We know, like, art imitates life, right? And vice versa. He's not the only one. How many more men are victim to this and they're unaware of it? It's unbeknownst to them that this is happening behind their back. How many white men is this happening to? What do you guys think? So he goes on to say the humiliation of having been a cuckold for almost a year before the divorce was horrible. Okay. See, this is a part I think that is confusing to me, right? Because I've heard this come up in other conversations where people have inboxed me and sharing their story and expressing their pain, confusion, and abandonment, right? From a partner like they were with in a relationship. They were the cuckold. And even a black man, not just white men, even a black man has expressed, like, he's hurt, he's surprised that this could happen to him. Like, he can be stepped over and walked over. It's like, how are you surprised? I get it, though, because it's like, that's not what you agreed upon. Like, you agreed that this person would essentially trample over you and treat you like shit within your consent, under your terms, right? But when they do it on their terms, so rewind back to the scenario of this black man who was a cuckold. He basically had expressed to me in the email, which I shared with you guys, and you guys can go find that video in my cuckold series on YouTube under the playlist Cuckold. He said that let me give you guys, I'm gonna paint the scenario. He was dating this woman, and the terms were essentially he would pleasure her, right? He, they would do their thing. He would pleasure her, get her ready, essentially, for her dates with these outside men. What that pleasuring looked like, who knows, right? But just think of the ways that a woman can be pleasured. He pleasure her, get her dressed and everything, provide her money, right? So she could go out there and enjoy her night with these men. She would go out, come back, and then he would clean her up, right? Do the cleanup. Now, that part to me is disgusting. That's just my personal opinion. I know that's a thing. I know it's a fetish, right, for men to enjoy the cleanup. So after she would go out and do her thing with whatever man that she was with, she would come back home, right, to her man, to this man, and he would clean her up. This would be going on, I guess, for a while now. But apparently she dogged him out. She left. Like, she just kind of abandoned him. She was done with him, right? And I'm thinking at some point, which I've discussed this in that video. I went in detail about it. We have a little bit of time left in this video. I have to be mindful of the time because I do have an event to get to. But I had to be very frank and honest with him, right? When we think about the psychology of this dynamic of a relationship and what drives people, right? What would drive a woman to get off, right? To be pleasured, to gain a sense of satisfaction in being with a man of the sorts, right? Who likes to essentially be humiliated, right? To be used, to be trampled over, right? To just kind of be discarded. He's setting himself up to just be used as this object, essentially, right? He's providing financial pleasure for her, right? He's giving her money. He's satisfying her in a sexual way. For him, he gets off on it, apparently. If he didn't, he would not be in a dynamic like that. So he's gaining something from it too. And I've talked about like the psychology of cuckolding in my very first cuckold video. In my very first cuckold video, I explained like the psychological underpinnings of why white men are drawn to this, right? And how it kind of ties back to earlier childhood experiences, perhaps, and developmental experiences, right? It's like they are chasing after that first high, so to speak, compared to drug abuse, right? It's like this chemical wiring that happens in the brain when you experience your first high, and then after that you're chasing after that experience, right, of what you felt when you first indulged in marijuana, whatever your choice drug was. So that's similar to that experience of if when you were a child, right, you suffered abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. If at some point during your young adulthood, right, you were humiliated by a woman that you also were deeply in love with, right, it's like conditioning. When you pair those two experiences side by side, simultaneously, actually, it's happening at the same time. This person is kind of sending mixed signals, right? So yes, on one hand, you as a man, right, you may have been with a woman that you were deeply in love with. She made you feel very special, very seen, loved, and cared for. But meanwhile, this happened too, right, in the context of your relationship with her. That can be very difficult to tease apart. People ask the question as to why do people who are in abusive relationships, why do they stay? And it can be a man or a woman. Why? Because it's not that cut and dry, right? And that's where the therapy piece comes in, to tease apart that part of the person who did show signs of love, right? In their understanding of what love is, that made them feel good, but at the same time did display very harsh and unloving behavior towards that person. You have to tease those two things apart because they're not the same. Our brain does not make that distinction, right? So that's the tricky part. Our brain kind of consolidates those experiences into one. And you see this person as, okay, this is a person that makes me feel good, but at times I feel bad. But for the most part, I mean, I feel good. Even a bad experience that comes from a person that you are in love with, it's interpreted by the brain as a good experience, unfortunately. That's the tricky part about it. So it's like, for men who find themselves in this type of situation, I find it hilarious because it's like they somehow are just drawn into it. Like, it's like you kind of just stumble into this reality. How did I get here? Right? Without taking the time to really think, to really analyze the situation and break down, like, what is it about you? And that's the reason why when I do my video responses to you guys as emails, like, I approach it from a psychological perspective, because I think my intent, my motivation, I mean, as a psychologist first and foremost, but just as a person who's vlogging about topics that I think are very serious in nature. Yes, they're very taboo, but this is something very serious, right? We're talking about people's lives and emotions here, right? Their livelihood. I think it's first and foremost most important to know thyself. Know what motivates you, what draws you to this type of dynamic of a relationship, as opposed to the alternative. What is it? What is it within you? Right? Some men have explained it, oh, well, you know, when I was young, I somehow stumbled across this porn video, this category, this genre of porn, and then that is what inspired me. That kind of what has shaped my behavior and my interests, my attitudes towards this. Like, not so much, right? What is it about you that is drawn to that particular genre? Right, when you click on that video, that porn video, what is it that makes you want to continue watching it? Even if you didn't know what it was about, right? It's something within you. That's the question that you need to be able to answer. If you cannot answer that, I feel like you should not be involving yourself in these dynamics. So apparently this particular person was in a consensual, mutually agreed upon dynamic, cuckold dynamic with his ex-wife, right, who left him to be with her, the bull that she was having an affair with. My thing is, okay, going to this, what he just says, the humiliation of having been a cuckold for almost a year before the divorce. So you were a cuckold during your marriage, essentially, with this woman. He says it was horrible, but probably resulted from other marital issues. So let me clarify, right? I don't want to misunderstand you if you're watching this, which you should be, because you sent me the email. When you say you were a cuckold, right? Were you a cuckold by proxy? You know, like, were you a cuckold by choice? Or did this just happen as a byproduct of the marital issues that you were enduring in that relationship? It sounds like the latter. It sounds like you just became a cuckold just kind of by default, right? Of being in a very toxic marriage that was already over probably when it first started, you know. You say you should realize, though, that most white men who become cuckolds, it was not a choice, and we have no interest in watching. So here is where we're getting to, he's like answering my questions as they're popping up in my mind, right? We're breaking this video, we're breaking this email down live, right, as I'm doing this video, right? I had no preparation, which that's how I usually approach my video responses. Like, I get the email and I just come to you guys and respond to it live without any kind of forethought going into it. So it's interesting, like, he just answered essentially my question. He said, you should realize, though, that most white men, when he says most white men, he's speaking for himself, right? I find it interesting when people use that terminology, right? They say most most, no, you're talking about yourself. So speak for thyself unless you have research to specifically back up your claim, right? He's talking about himself here. So instead of saying most white men, He should have just essentially said, I became a cuckold not by my choice. It was not my choice to become a cuckold, right? I have no interest in watching. That is a specific fetish some people have that is a small percentage overall but gets amplified by porn. There we go again, right? Amplified. Don't stop blaming porn. I think that porn is just a tool, right, to serve your already desire that is already within you, right? Your desire that has already been shaped and formed within you. That's already in you, right? You're just watching porn to further satisfy that desire, that interest, that craving, that itch. That's what porn is, right? That's just like whatever interest that you may have when you go to the theater, you may go, whatever you do, right, that you like to do, that you go outside of yourself to do, right, that's external from you. Any of those activities, you're doing those activities because it's something within you and you're drawn to that, right? And it kind of like reinforces that desire, that interest that you have. The guy would be in serious danger if I wouldn't have walked in or anything like that. Okay, sorry, I read this wrong. He says the guy would be in serious danger if I would have walked in or anything like that. This phenomenon happens mostly behind our backs. It happened like this, yo. This is a secret that white men don't want black men to know. Their wives, and this happened to him, right? But we know he is not alone in this, right? We know that's why he's speaking for most white men, right? Now, we don't know how many white men, but we do know that no one lives in a vacuum. So when you think of occurrences of a particular behavior, when you see it in a person, usually you see it repeatedly across that population, that demographic that which that person represents, right? He is not by himself in this. This is a regular occurrence, I think, all right? Now, to say it's most, I wouldn't say like it's happening in most marriages, right, of white men. I would not say most, right? But I will say that it's significant enough to see that, like, okay, this is a phenomenon, like he says, this is a problem that is happening. This is a kind of like a significant occurrence that is happening within these households of white men who most likely are unaware that this is happening. That their white wife is being pleasured, unbeknownst to them, behind their back by a black man, right? Funny! I just think it's hilarious. All right, I gotta wrap this video up. We're probably gonna come back and do a part 2. Feel free to leave your questions, comments below, and I will respond to them in my follow-up video. It's kind of sad on one hand, but at the same time, it's funny because, like, I clearly get it. Going with the theme, right, which we've been talking about, like white men being lesser endowed compared to black men. Some people say, oh, that's just a myth. That's fallacy. That's just this made-up idea that porn perpetuates, right? Well, some of y'all watch too much porn, and y'all telling on yourself. That's the thing. Because that's not reality, I think. But at the same time, I think there is a ounce of truth to this idea of big black cock, BBC. And BBC is more so an energy, I've said this before, that is felt. You know, I'm just saying though, like black men just lay it down differently than white men. It's a different energy. I mean, you don't have to lay down with a white man to know it's a different, just being amongst white men, right? Compared to black men. That is, you can feel a different energy. Y'all know you clearly. That's the reason why police officers, police departments are so hyper vigilant, you know, when it comes to interacting with black men. They know it's a different energy. It's a different everything when it comes to the interaction with black people, yo. So, yes, you do have to approach black people slightly different. Would I say to the extent of, you know, coming to them with a gun, you know, when you're just like asking questions? No. But I can definitely understand the fear that is driving these white police officers, right? Because, yeah, they know that black men overpower them. Without that gun, you're overpowered in all different aspects, right? So it makes clear sense. He says, as far as your videos on size, my conversations with women have given me the understanding that too big is simply painful for them. Yeah. It's not really pleasurable. I mean, there's such thing as a man being too fucking big. So I think for him to say that, yes, that is true, but my thing is why he's saying that. It's not so much what a person says. For me, I'm more concerned about why is he saying this statement that he just said about conversations with women have given him the understanding that being too big is like, why is he bringing that into this conversation? A man who has been betrayed, been abandoned, been hurt by his ex-wife and left, you know, alone. She left him alone and she went to be with a black man. Think about it. Now he was married to a white woman, which means that for him, race is important, right? You have people say, oh, race doesn't matter, right? And those people are more, I would say, more fluid in their identity, and especially in their interactions with people who are not of their race. You know, but for a white man to deliberately choose to marry a white woman, that is a choice, right? Some people say, oh, well, love just happens. No, love doesn't just happen, especially marriage. That is a deliberate choice. It's actually a political decision to choose to marry someone of the same race as you, right? So clearly that is his preference. I think maybe it was his preference, so we're going to continue. But it's interesting for him to include the topic of penis size in this conversation, because I think it's just like a cognitive distortion, right? It's just like a way to make himself feel better about his own insecurities and his own lack thereof of his smaller penis size, right? Compared to black men in his mind, right? So he's like, okay, well, yeah, I may have a small penis size, right? But I heard too big is not good either. Approximately 5 inches is perfect for women to achieve pleasure. The black woman who I have recently begun dating and genuinely like will probably have some insights for me when we get there. Relates his penis size and her degree of satisfaction. But in the meantime, I wanted to share those observations with you after having viewed several of your videos, which contain many fascinating insights, and he leaves his name. Yo, this is so interesting. I think it's funny. I wish we had more time here in this video, but we don't. I do have to wrap it up. I think this is hilarious. I mean, it's like ironically speaking, right? What can we say? What can we say? Does that solve the problem? Like him choosing to pretty much do to his wife what's been done to him? Because he started the conversation with, like, he wished he could show her, like, show off his new black girlfriend to his ex-wife who cheated on him, essentially, who betrayed him. To be with a black man. And he said that it was not by his choice that he became a cuckold, that this just happened, like, by default, essentially, he became a cuckold. And that's kind of unfortunate, but it sounds like he was in that situation for a degree of time, like a year, before they got a divorce. It's just like, damn, yo. That to me is disgusting. It's repulsive. To be like in his shoes in that situation, right? And then I think in his mind he thinks the solution is like doing to her what's been done to him, I don't think she cares. That's the unfortunate part. Like, people think that they are doing something major. Like, they go out of their way. Like, I'm gonna show her, right? I'm gonna get with this black woman, right? And I'm gonna try to go out my way and show her. Because the fidelity in that marriage that marriage that was essentially was that they were going to commit, like, racial fidelity, essentially, right? Like, being with each other as the same race. To step outside of one's race, it sounds like that's like racial infidelity on top of the cheating, you know. It's like adding injury to insult on top of it, you know. So it's like a double whammy. Like, damn. But I don't think that it matters. She's already moved on. She's lived her life. She made a clear statement. She communicated a clear statement when she was with you. For a person to do this behind your back, that is a blatant statement. Listen, done. They're over you, right? And you don't satisfy them. And they have different values, right? Everyone has different values. For her, that is something she values. Sexual satisfaction. Being sexually satisfied was a high priority. Apparently, you mentioned marital issues. That's a very broad term, okay? That could mean a whole number of things, a whole host of things, and I guess you didn't really want to get into it, right? But infidelity is a very dynamic, complex situation. Right? So to assume that she left you or betrayed you or the marriage ended because of your, lesser endowed penis, I wouldn't reduce it to that. You did mention marital issues, so you know that there were other things happening, right? And I think that was just her way to kind of put a Band-Aid on it, right? Little panacea to cover up the insecurities that she was experiencing with not being fully sexually satisfied. That can be very frustrating, right? When a woman is with a man and she's not thoroughly sexually satisfied, on top of marital stress, right? That can be so frustrating. It's just like, why are you here? Like, why am I with you? I mean, at least if you were able to fuck good, to bang her down good in the bed, that keep a lot of women there. You think, that make a lot of women, that trap a lot of women in relationships. Man can be a piece of shit. But if he lay in that pipe, then that goes to show you the perspective, right? Putting things into perspective of, like, the value of good sex, right? To anyone, man or a woman. Because it's deeper than sex, right? It's a spiritual connection. It's a biological, physiological reaction that a person experiences when they are thoroughly satisfied sexually, right? That's like a memory that's deeply encoded in their DNA, and they crave that. Going back to, drug use, right? They crave that good feeling. Like, who doesn't want to feel good? That pleasure-seeking behavior. But I do have to wrap this up. This was great. We can follow up with a part 2. I want you guys to share your comments below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.